Okay. All right. So thank you so much for meeting with me today.
Yeah,
Sorry, as
sorry.
I sit down here. So before we started the video, we already took a minute to write down some of the highlights and questions. We already looked at student work. So we'll just go ahead and get started. So what I'd like to do is we can kind of go back and forth and talk about the highlights from the lesson. So do you want to share out first? What do you think went well?
First and foremost, student engagement.
Yeah.
They were engaged, they were wanting more, they wanted to try new things, they wanted to build different ones, so that was great.
Yeah,
How about you?
Well, and I know especially for this class, like that was kind of the purpose of this activity
Yeah.
is we were like, okay, we've like talked at them and give them resources, and this was our next step for like getting them engaged. So I had that one as well for sure. And with that, I had everyone was participating. Like there was not a single person in that classroom that was choosing not to do the work, which has happened before.
Right.
So the fact that literally everyone was engaged, that kind of goes with yours. So. So my other one I had was students were able to use the periodic table. So like we have been working on what is the periodic table, like what does it tell us, and I felt like with this lesson they were really able to apply that knowledge, so I thought that was awesome.
Yep, I would agree. I had that as well. Students reading the parts of an element from the periodic table and being able to apply it. So the way that we structured it is that we did a gradual release model, so then we were able to, the last one that they got, there wasn't a slide, there wasn't any information, we were just able to tell them,
Yeah.
and then they read the periodic table,
Mhm.
they figured out the protons, they figured out the neutrons, they figured out the electrons. That was key right there. So it was a really good exit ticket, end of our lesson.
Yeah,
So that was a plus.
and I love that you had them record, like, so we use the marshmallows and the chocolate chips for the protons, neutrons, and electrons, and I love that you had them like then record it on the sheet of paper, so then we still had that visual evidence later on. So yes, we went around and checked it during the lesson, but also like now we have a physical
Body of
evidence. Yeah, perfect.
Right here.
Woohoo! So I think my other one, I'm trying to see. Oh, the students were eager to get feedback. So
Yeah.
like as we were walking
That's a
around,
good one.
yeah, checking to see like were they correct. They were like, me next, you know, like they really wanted to know, did I have it right? And they were accepting feedback well, which I feel like is really big for that classroom.
No, I'm gonna put that down for later because that's something
Oh,
we should
awesome.
raise them for.
Yes.
On
accepting
Monday.
feedback. Yes, I think that's a great idea because I know, especially, you know, just in general, 6th grade, when you try to say, you know, that one wasn't
Middle school
correct.
kids,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah, exactly. So I think kudos to
To
you
them.
for and
Oh.
them for like, I think creating that culture where like they were willing to take that feedback
Yeah.
and wanting to change it to make it correct.
And no attitudes,
No.
no nothing. Like it was, yeah.
It's like a magical.
That's a really good one.
Yeah.
Progress.
Progress.
Okay, the
Okay.
last one I had was really the vocabulary piece. We've been really hitting the vocabulary.
Oh.
And I felt like the kids got a better understanding of what a proton and a neutron was and where it fit within the nucleus and that they had to be different.
Yeah.
Like, so the protons were the colored marshmallows and the neutrons were the white, the neutral line. So that helped, I think, hit home those vocabulary pieces.
Yeah.
I mean, showing a picture, it doesn't make sense until they're doing it. And so that I think was key.
Yeah, and that's awesome because we've been working on vocabulary literally from day one. So
Yeah.
for them to finally like the light bulb clicked,
Yeah.
I felt like today. That's awesome. So thank you for sharing lots of wonderful things. So then the other thing I asked was just to kind of think about, we looked at the data. So like what questions either came up during the lesson or like from the data, what are some questions we came up with? So do you want to share one you had?
Yes. Do we,
Hi. We're just recording the lesson, don't mind us.
okay, so one of the questions was, do we need a follow-up on Monday on the layers or the shells of the electrons? Like, I feel like that was the most challenging part for the kiddos.
Yeah.
Because as we were giving their feedback, again, the nucleus was correct, but the electron placement was incorrect on a
Yes.
lot of mine.
So talking about the fact that there can be 2 and then 8. Yeah.
And then that you can't have more than 2. They really struggled with that concept as we were working through that.
Well, 2, and I think like you hear 8 and oxygen actually had 8. So it was like, oh, I'll put these
all 8 on
on
that,
that
right.
second
So
shelf.
how to differentiate when that's a different one.
Yeah, that's a great
So
great
it
question.
does involve math.
Yeah.
We have to, yeah.
Yeah. And then we can pick a question that we want to focus on as our next steps. After we share out some of our
Okay.
questions, we'll pick a focus one, okay? Mine was, well, I had a couple, but when we make the molecules or compounds, how do we connect that to this work we did today? That was one of the questions I had. So like, yeah, we did an atom, but then as we transition that into the compounds,
What is that gonna look like?
yeah, and like understanding the difference between just a specific atom and the compounds.
Oh, that's a
So-
great question.
Oh,
I
thank
think we're
you.
really gonna have to look at that.
Yeah, we are definitely gonna have to look at that. What else?
I said, are we ready for an assessment or a check for understanding on the vocabulary piece, the parts of an atom? We've done a lot of entry tickets, exit tickets to kind of push them towards that.
Yeah.
But I think now the hands-on, are we ready to do another one to make sure?
And I think that's a good point because we had been noticing, we had been doing the entrance tickets and the exit tickets and they weren't quite making that
Nope.
connection.
So did they? now?
So yeah, from our
Yeah.
observations, it seemed like they did. So now would be the perfect time to check that.
Yep.
And we have their work from what they did today, but then like really the specific terms.
Yep.
That's a good idea. So follow up. Okay. And then my other one, like thinking like way ahead, how does all of this go into like experiments with molecular compounds? So like today was building an atom. Our next one that we're thinking about is doing building a molecule, but then like what is an actual like experiment where we can test that, I guess would be my thoughts for next
Yeah.
steps, but that's a little down the road, so.
Yeah.
Oh, well, not really that kind of.
Because it's
One day at a
next-
time.
Yeah, chemical reactions
Yeah.
is where we gotta go next. So
Exactly.
how does this fit into that?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So based on those, I'm just thinking like, what is the most immediate thing?
I think immediate Monday is the electrons really hitting home. Do they get the electron
shell.
piece and what kind of hands-on or activity that we can do to hit that home?
Mm-hmm.
And then your question,
Yeah,
next
how do
steps
we
for-
transition?
Yep, to molecule and compound.
Okay,
We gotta figure that
Awesome.
out to be able to plan those lessons for next week.
yeah. Okay, so I would say the next step for us would be, let's look at what can we do for the electron shell. I'm just restating what you're
Yeah.
saying, sorry. And then the compounds component. So that's what we need to look at for next week.
Okay.
One other quick follow-up question, and we kind of talked about it already. So that last one, you're like, oh, we already did the 3. And then that's when we brought up the oxygen, which I thought was perfect because you're right, we're gonna be doing H2O, so why not dive into that oxygen atom? I thought that was a perfect solution to that. Like, when we go to do this for period 3, do you think we should do that again?
Yep, so
Yeah.
I actually have that as, we need to add the oxygen slide, but I don't wanna add
Okay.
the, anything from the periodic table.
Mhm.
I don't wanna add a pre-done picture of it.
Mhm.
I want them to do exactly what for fourth period. I wanna see
Yeah.
if they can figure it out. Can they read the periodic table?
Yeah.
Can they figure out the parts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the other ones, it was, you still kind of had to figure it out.
You
because
did.
You had to know
Yep.
what to look at, but it was there. So I thought
Yep.
that was a perfect scaffold, and then taking that scaffold away, and they were successful with that,
Mhm.
which was awesome. That's what we would want to see third period do as well.
Exactly. So
Okay.
that was definitely one of my things that we would have to do for this future lesson.
Awesome. Anything else?
Yeah, actually a couple of things.
Oh, great.
Pre-teaching, now we need to build in whatever we do on Monday for
Mm.
fourth, we need to make sure that that slide is included for third, so they have that better understanding of the electron shells
And you're thinking before the
the activity,
which makes
so that that
sense,
won't
yeah.
be such a hiccup, and we wouldn't have to stop and do that teaching within the lesson.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
I did not do a good job of going back to the science notebook and having them then record in the science notebook, but then I'm grappling with that because they did all the recording on here.
Yeah.
Do they need to do it twice? Because they've drawn a
Oh,
picture
good
of just
question.
the hydrogen atom. I think we drew a lithium. Is it really necessary for us to draw all of them?
Well, and I think you bring up a
Since
good
we already
point
have
of they did do the other 2 in their notebook.
Right.
So that is a nice, like, hey, go back to that rather than
Yes.
having to hand that paper back out. So it's in their notebook and they can refer back to it, but then the next 2 are on the page, or on the
Yeah.
student's sheet. Because remember with fourth period, we gave them the one-sided and then the double-sided. So are you thinking do the first one as an I do still, the second one in their
Notebook, and then
and then the other 2.
2 or 3, yeah.
Oh yeah, because it was 3.
Yeah.
In there.
Yep.
So then we still need to have another sheet because they'll do it 3 times. So we'll still need the single
Yep.
or well double, it's twice fine. But yeah, okay, that's good to know for material. Okay, overall, I mean, I was super happy with the. I mean, how did you feel?
Yeah, I was super happy.
Yeah.
Again, key thing for us was with this group, we needed to make sure the engagement was high and that it was hands-on. And I hate to say the learning was an added bonus that was so successful because this was such at the beginning of our time, it was our hardest class. So the fact that we completely have changed the culture and built up the relationships with these kids in 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I don't even know.
It's
That
crazy.
this is,
I think it was
Yep.
awesome. I'm super excited.
me
so.
too. So I'm glad to do it. I'm happy that we'll be doing this and tweak it for 3rd.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're the class that's gonna probably need those scaffolds. So the fact that we were able to try it with 4th and see, oh, what didn't work, what did,
And pacing. We have to do pacing and a timer on our cell phone because that class is shorter.
And we might even plan to just do the notebook one day and then the
Building the next day.
that's kind of how it happened.
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
So awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to go over this with me
You're
today.
welcome.
So we're gonna meet again and look at those double questions about electron shell and
Yep.
what can we do to make sure students have a clear understanding of that, and then also those compounds. How do we transition? So we'll meet again to talk about that.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.